Everyone, today we are going to start with the chapter number 14 of class 11th, that is breathing and exchange of gases. So let's start. As you have read earlier, oxygen is utilized by the organism to indirectly break down simple molecules like glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, etc. to derive energy to perform various activities. Carbon dioxide, which is harmful, is also released during the above catabolic reaction. It is therefore evident that oxygen has to be continuously provided to the cells, and carbon dioxide produced by the cells have to be released out. This process of exchange of oxygen from the atmosphere with carbon dioxide produced by the cells is called breathing. What is this process of exchange of oxygen from the atmosphere with carbon dioxide produced by the cells is called breathing, which is commonly known as a respiration. Place your hands on your chest. You can feel the chest moving up and down. You know that it is due to breathing. How do we breathe? The respiratory organs and the mechanism of breathing are described in the following sections of the chapter. Starting with the respiratory organs, mechanism of breathing vary among different groups of animals depending mainly on their habitats and level of organization. Lower invertebrates like sponges, coelentrates, flatworms, etc. exchange oxygen with carbon dioxide by simple diffusion over their entire body surface. Yes, they exchange oxygen with carbon dioxide by simple diffusion. Earthworms use their moist cuticle, and insects have a network of tubes called tracheal tubes. Tracheal, insect to transport atmospheric air within the body. Specialized vascular structures called gills, bronchial respiration, are used by the most of the aquatic arthropods and mollusks, whereas vascularized bags called lungs, pulmonary respirations, are used by the terrestrial forms for the exchange of gases. Among vertebrates, fishes use gills, whereas amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals respire through lungs. Amphibians like frog can respire through their moist skin. Cutaneous respiration, yes. Human respiratory system. Let us do it fast. We have a pair of external nostrils opening out above the upper lips. It leads to nasal chamber through the nasal passage. The nasal chamber opens into pharynx, which is a common passage for what? Which is a common passage for food and air. Pharynx open into larynx, which is the voice box. Into the larynx region opens into trachea. Larynx is a cartilaginous box which help in sound production and hence is called a sound box. During swallowing, glottis can be covered by a thin elastic cartilaginous flap called epiglottis to prevent the entry of food into the larynx. Trachea is a straight tube extending up to the mid-thoracic cavity, which divides at the level of fifth thoracic vertebrae into a right and left primary bronchi. Each bronchi undergoes repeated divisions to form the secondary and tertiary bronchi and bronchioles, ending up in a very thin terminal bronchioles. The trachea, primary, secondary, and tertiary bronchi and initial bronchioles are supported by incomplete cartilaginous rings. Each terminal bronchiole gives rise to a number of very thin, irregular, walled, and vascularized bag called alveoli. The branching network of bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli, they comprise the lungs. We have two lungs which are covered by a double-layered pleura. External pleura, internal pleura, and within them is a pleural fluid. It reduces the friction on the lung surface. The outer pleural membrane is in close contact with the thoracic vertebrae or lining, where the inner is in contact with the lung surface. The parts starting with the external nostrils up to the terminal bronchioles, they constitute the conducting part. From external nostril to terminal bronchioles, it is conducting part, whereas alveoli and the ducts, they form a respiratory and exchange part. Alveoli and the ducts, they form a respiratory or exchange part of the respiratory system. The conducting part transports atmospheric air to the alveoli, clears it from foreign particles, humidifies, and also brings the air to the body temperature. What do the conducting part do? Very important. Exchange part is the site of actual diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the blood and atmospheric air. The lungs are situated in the thoracic chamber, which is anatomically an airtight chamber. The thoracic chamber is formed dorsally by the vertebral column, ventrally by sternum, laterally by ribs, and lower side by dome-shaped diaphragm. The anatomical setup of lungs and thorax is such that any change in the volume of thoracic cavity will be reflected in the lungs. Such an arrangement is essential for breathing, as we cannot directly alter the pulmonary volume. Respiration involves the following steps. First is the breathing or pulmonary ventilation, by which atmospheric air is drawn in and carbon dioxide is released out. Diffusion of gases across alveolar membrane and transport of gases by the blood. Then diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the blood and the tissue. Then utilization of oxygen by cells for catabolic reactions and resultant release of carbon dioxide, which is cellular respiration. Mechanism of breathing. Breathing involves two stages: inspiration, during which atmospheric air is drawn in; expiration, in which alveolar air is released out. The movement of air into and out of lungs is carried out by creating a pressure gradient between the lungs and the atmosphere. Inspiration can occur if the pressure within the lungs, which is intrapulmonary pressure, is less than the atmospheric pressure. There is a negative pressure in the lungs with respect to the atmospheric pressure. Similarly, expiration takes place when intrapulmonary pressure is higher than the atmospheric pressure. The diaphragm and a specialized set of muscles, external and internal intercostal muscles between the ribs, help in generation of such gradients. Inspiration is initiated by contraction of diaphragm, which increases the volume of thoracic chamber in the anterior-posterior axis. The contraction of external intercostal muscle lifts up the ribs and the sternum, causing an increase in the volume of the thoracic chamber in the dorsoventral axis. The overall increase in the thoracic volume causes a similar increase in pulmonary volume. An increase in pulmonary volume what decreases intrapulmonary pressure to less than the atmospheric pressure, which forces the air from outside to move into the lungs. That is inspiration. Relaxation of diaphragm and intercostal muscles returns the diaphragm. But there is contraction of external intercostal muscles and sternum to the normal position reduce the thoracic volume, thereby pulmonary volume. This leads to an increase in intrapulmonary pressure slightly above the atmospheric pressure, causing the expulsion of air from the lungs. That is expiration. We have the ability to increase the strength of inspiration and expiration with the help of additional muscles in the abdomen. On an average, a healthy human breathes 12 to 16 times a minute. The volume of air involved in the breathing movements can be estimated by using a spirometer, but spirometer cannot measure what? Residual volume, which helps in clinical assessment of pulmonary function. Respiratory volumes and the capacities. Tidal volume. Volume of air inspired or expired during a normal respiration. It is approx 500 ml. That is, a healthy man can inspire or expire approximately 6,000 to 8,000 milliliter of air per minute. Then comes inspiratory reserve volume. Additional volume of air a person can inspire by a forceful inspiration. This averages 2,500 milliliter to 3,000 milliliter. Expiratory reserve volume, which is additional volume of air a person can expire by forcible expiration. This averages 1,000 to 1,100 ml. Residual volume. Volume of air remaining in the lungs even after forceful expiration. This averages 1,100 ml to 1,200 ml. By adding up a few respiratory volume described above, one can derive various pulmonary capacities which can be used in clinical diagnosis. Inspiratory capacity. Total volume of air a person can inspire after normal expiration. This includes tidal volume and inspiratory reserve volume. Very important, all these volumes. Expiratory capacity. The total volume of air a person can expire after normal inspiration. This includes tidal volume and expiratory reserve volume. Functional residual capacity. Volume of air that will remain in the lungs after a normal expiration. This includes ERV, expiratory reserve volume, and residual volume. Vital capacity, the maximum volume of air a person can breathe in after a forced expiration. This includes expiratory reserve volume, tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, or maximum volume of air a person can breathe out after a forceful inspiration. Okay. Total lung capacity, total volume of air accommodated in the lungs at the end of the forced inspiration. This includes residual volume, expiratory reserve volume, tidal volume, and inspiratory reserve volume, or simply it is vital capacity plus residual volume. Exchange of gases. Alveoli are the primary sites of exchange of gases. Exchange of gases also occur between blood and tissue. Oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged in these sites by simple diffusion, mainly based on pressure, concentration gradient. Solubility of the gases as well as thickness of the membranes involved in diffusion are also some important factors that can affect the rate of diffusion. Pressure contributed by an individual gas in a mixture of gases is partial pressure and is represented by PO2 for oxygen and PCO2 for carbon dioxide. Partial pressure of these two gases in the atmospheric air and two sites of diffusion are given in this table. And the data given in the table clearly indicates that concentration gradient for oxygen from alveoli to blood and blood to tissues similarly. This is oxygen is maximum in alveoli. Yes, atmospheric air, these all are given 159, 104, 14 deoxygenated blood for 95 and oxygenated. Then in tissue it is 40. Carbon dioxide 0.3 atmospheric air. Alveoli 40, 45, 40, 45. Clear. Now moving next is gradient. A gradient is present for carbon dioxide in the opposite direction, that is from tissues to blood and blood to alveoli. As the solubility of carbon dioxide is 20 to 25 times higher than oxygen, the amount of carbon dioxide that can diffuse through the diffusion membrane per unit difference in the partial pressure is much higher compared to that of O2. The diffusion membrane is made up of three major layers. Thin squamous epithelium of alveoli, endothelium of alveolar capillaries, and the basement substance composed of a thin basement membrane supporting the squamous epithelium and the basement membrane surrounding the single layer endothelium cells of capillary in between them. However, its total thickness is much less than a millimeter. Therefore, all the factors in our body are favorable for diffusion of oxygen from alveoli to tissue and that of carbon dioxide from tissues to alveoli. Transport of gases. Blood is the medium of transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide. About 97% of oxygen is transported by RBCs in the blood. Remaining 3% of oxygen is carried out in dissolved state through plasma. Nearly 20 to 25% of carbon dioxide is transported by RBCs, whereas 70% of it is carried as bicarbonate. About 7% of carbon dioxide is carried in a dissolved state through plasma. Transport of oxygen. Hemoglobin is a red colored iron containing pigment present in RBCs. O2 can bind with hemoglobin in a reversible manner, yes, to form oxyhemoglobin. Each hemoglobin molecule can carry a maximum of 4 molecules of oxygen. Binding of oxygen with hemoglobin is primarily related to partial pressure of oxygen. Partial pressure of carbon dioxide, hydrogen ion concentration, and temperature are other factors which can interfere with this binding. A sigmoid curve is obtained when the percentage saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen is plotted against the PO2. This curve is called oxygen dissociation curve and is highly useful in studying the effect of factors like PCO2, H hydrogen concentration on binding of oxygen with the hemoglobin in the alveoli where there is high PO2, low PCO2. Partial pressure of oxygen is higher in alveoli and low partial pressure of carbon dioxide in alveoli. Lesser H positive concentration and lower temperature, the factors are all favorable for formation of oxyhemoglobin, whereas in the tissue where low PO2, high PCO2, high H positive concentration, high temperature exist, the conditions are favorable for dissociation of oxygen from the oxyhemoglobin. This clearly indicates that oxygen gets bound to hemoglobin in the lungs surface and gets dissociated at the tissues. Every 100 ml of oxygenated blood can deliver around 5 ml of oxygen to the tissues under normal physiological conditions. Now, transport of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is carried by hemoglobin as carbaminohemoglobin, about 20 to 25%. This binding is related to partial pressure of carbon dioxide. PO2 is a major factor which could affect this binding. When PCO2 is higher and PO2 is low, as in the tissue, more binding of carbon dioxide occur, whereas PCO2 is low. When PCO2 is low, PO2 is high, as in alveoli dissociation of carbon dioxide from carbaminohemoglobin takes place. That is, carbon dioxide which is bound to hemoglobin from tissues is delivered at the alveoli. RBCs contain a very high concentration of enzyme carbonic anhydrase, which convert it into carbonic acid, and a minute quantity of the same is present in the plasma too. This enzyme facilitates the following reaction. This is the reaction carbonic anhydrase, carbonic acid, bicarbonate ion. At the tissue site, At the tissue site where partial pressure of CO2 is high due to catabolism, carbon dioxide diffuses into blood and forms bicarbonate and H positive. At alveolar site where PCO2 is low and the reaction proceeds in the opposite direction, leading to the formation of carbon dioxide and water. Thus, carbon dioxide trapped as bicarbonate at tissue level and transported to the alveoli is released out as carbon dioxide. Every 100 ml of deoxygenated blood delivers approximately 4 ml of carbon dioxide to the alveoli. Regulation of respiration. Human beings have a significant ability to maintain and moderate the respiratory rhythm to suit demands of the body tissue. This is done by neural system. A specialized center present in the medulla region of the brain called respiratory rhythm center is primarily responsible for this regulation. Other center present in the pons region of the brain called pneumotaxic center can moderate the functions of respiratory rhythm center. Neural signal from the center can reduce the duration of inspiration and thereby alter the respiratory rate. A chemosensitive area is situated adjacent to the rhythm center, which is highly sensitive to carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions. Increase in substances can activate the center, which in turn can signal the rhythm center to make necessary adjustments in the respiratory process by which these substances can be eliminated. Receptors associated with the aortic arc and carotid artery also can recognize changes in carbon dioxide and H positive concentration and send necessary signals to the rhythm center for remedial actions. Remedial actions. The role of oxygen in the regulation of rhythm center respiratory rhythm is quite insignificant. Disorders of respiratory system. Asthma is a difficulty in breathing causing wheezing due to inflammation of bronchi and bronchioles. Emphysema is a chronic disorder in which alveolar walls are damaged due to which respiratory surfaces decrease. One of the major causes of this is cigarette smoking. Occupational respiratory disorder. In certain industries, especially those involving grinding or stone breaking, so much dust is produced that the defense mechanism of the body cannot fully cope with the situation. Long exposure can give rise to inflammation leading to fibrosis, proliferation of fibrous tissue, and thus causing serious lung damage. Workers in such industries should wear a protective mask.